Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I did a video yesterday morning discussing how to use high volume triples to gain both size and explosiveness. And someone asked a question of, I don't really understand how you progress on something like this, how progression works. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's discuss kind of progression on this. All right, what people need to understand, progression on something like this isn't always about the single workout. Too many people get caught up in the minutia of a given workout and think everything has to come from this one session without realizing that it's things like your weekly tonnage, weekly fatigue that you build up, monthly tonnage, monthly fatigue, things like that is really how your body adapts. The individual workout itself, in the grand scheme of things, isn't that important. It does start to become about overall fatigue, tonnage, things like that accumulated over time. That's how your body adapts. Now, noobs, it's different. People who are novice lifters, your individual workouts matter tremendously because you actually grow and get stronger from virtually every workout you do. So that can give people a skewed idea as they become more advanced in lifting if that's the way the body responds. But that's really only for noobs. That's like your first 6 months of serious lifting in the gym. After that, it does start to become about adaptation over time. Now, one of the things that you're going to note here is that you're okay if you maintain the same weekly tonnage for up to 3 weeks. You can continue to adapt to that as long as training stimulus is sufficient. So what you need to make sure of is that if you want to make continual progression running something like high volumes of triples, that you're, after about 3 weeks, that you start to progress again, meaning you're going to have to add sets or add weight in some way because it takes about 3 weeks to fully adapt, kind of the law of adaptation, to where you stop making progress from generating the same sort of workloads. So people need to remember when we're talking about high volumes of triples, triples is with accumulation work. You have to remember that the body will only let you move weights at maximum speed, maximum power for about 3 repetitions, about 3 movements. It doesn't matter whether it's a punch or a kick or a weight or throwing something. You have about 3 bouts of explosiveness and then you start to slow down, and it could take 30 to 60 seconds for your body to be able to do that again. And it's the limits your nervous system sets on recruiting those upper threshold fibers at a certain rate. Like you're going through all of them through like a certain microseconds, and then it starts to slow down. It will take longer, more microseconds to recruit them. So the idea here is that you're trying to do as many explosive sets as you can over the course of a training session or even over the course of a week. And when you start looking at it that way, it starts to make sense. So you might come in and you might be working with 65% of your max, moving it as fast as possible on the deadlift or the push press or the Pendlay row or the power clean, whatever exercise you're trying to do with maximum speed. And people need to remember that a maximum speed rep recruits more muscle fibers than a slightly slower rep with the same weight. That isn't subject for debate. Bodybuilders don't always realize that, but exercise physiologists know that. We've known this a very long time. Speed is actually a component of muscle fiber recruitment. All right, so what you're trying to do is make sure that every rep that you do hits the same upper threshold fibers that a work set normally hits in the last 2 to 3 reps. Like a lot of times when you go to 8 rep set to failure, you really only hit those upper threshold fibers around the last 3 reps or so as you're approaching muscle failure. So by doing it this way, you're hammering all those, that full rate coding all the way up to the fastest fibers on every single rep by moving a moderately heavy weight as fast as possible. So what happens, eventually you'll reach a point where you stop adapting because the workload has stayed the same. So what you want to do is make sure that your weekly tonnage gets increased in some way. So what I would say to people, because obviously you're going to come in and do every lift more than once a week. Hopefully you are. If you're really trying to accumulate a lot of tonnage using a method like this, to build up your base, to build up your size, your speed, everything all at once, you're probably going to do it more than once a week. So let's say you're coming in and 3 times a week you're doing the push press for maximum speed. You might start with 3 sets of 3 on each session, gradually build to 4 sets of 3, build to 5 sets of 3, When you get to 5 sets of 3, I mean, you've increased quite a bit from 3 sets of 3, and you're now doing 15 total sets a week on that, hitting all those maximum threshold fibers. 15 sets times 3 reps, you're doing 45 reps. 45 reps using maximum power per week. You can then keep building on that. You build on that until you get up to where you can comfortably do 10 sets. To where you can comfortably do 10 sets. And what I would say to people like, well, when do you know when to add sets? When your last set in any given workout, you're still hitting maximum speed and it doesn't feel like a grinder, doesn't feel slow, it's still explosive and powerful. If you're doing that on the final set, then you know you might be good for one more. If you feel the final reps start to slow down at all, you're done adding sets for the day. And it might stop out at 6, and it might take you a week or two to get to 7 sets, another week or two to get to 8 sets. But the thing is, as long as somewhere through the week you are adding an extra set or two with the same weight, you are increasing your weekly tonnage. And you can calculate it that way. You can calculate it in terms of tonnage if you want. Like, you can go through and add up the math, see how much weight you're moving, and look at weight versus reps, like how much tonnage you're doing for how many reps. And it's okay to increase the weight a little bit if you don't lose too many sets doing so. But you know what? You can do the same thing. You can go through phases on it to where you might get up to where you're doing 10 sets of 3 times a week. So you're sitting here at something like 30 sets per week using maximum speed. You're probably not going to benefit by adding any more volume at that point, because you're going to see kind of the metabolic fatigue from it also start to cap out at around 30 total reps in a workout. On any given exercise or body part or whatever's going on there. So that's going to be kind of your upward cap as far as gaining more muscle off of it. It's probably going to be somewhere around 10 sets. So progressing beyond that's not really useful. You're going to need to add more days in there for that. But like I said, you're now at something like 90 reps per week using maximum speed, maximum power. 90 reps per week where you're hitting the upper threshold fibers that you hit near muscle failure on higher rep sets. And you're training everything to be explosive is going to make you a lot faster. It's going to bulk you up. You are going to get bigger doing this. And you have to think of it in those terms. Think about the metabolic fatigue you accumulate doing 90 moderately heavy reps in which you hit upper threshold muscle fibers on every one of those. You've hit every fiber type through the entire chain by doing that. They've all been fatigued. They've all been worked. A fantastic way to grow. And it is a lot of volume when you look at it in that perspective, from a hypertrophy perspective. What you can also do, and like I said, that will help you recover, once you reach that sort of volume, it's okay to back down. Because you've probably capped out progression from adding weekly tonnage and weekly reps to it. So when you reach that point to where you're able to do 10 sets of 3 times a week for 90 total reps, you probably capped everything out on progressing using the volume. At that point, it's fine to add weight and go all the way back down to 3 sets. Why? Because it doesn't matter that your tonnage has gone down. You've probably accumulated as much volume as you're going to be able to get away with actual tonnage at that point. And at that point, the weight's going to be really getting too light for you at that point, when you can get away with that because you've gotten too strong, you've gained too much muscle, too much extra thickness in your fastest twitch fibers. The weight's just going to be insufficient at that point. When you drop back down and add more weight, you've added a new training stimulus. So let's say you go up 5% on the weight. You've been doing, 150 pounds on that exercise. You add 5%, you're going to add, that's around 7.5 pounds. You could round it up to a solid 10 and go up about 6 or 7%. Restart the whole thing. And you know what? Go back down to 3 sets. 3 sets, because 3 sets will still give you good explosiveness, just enough volume, because you're getting 9 total reps per session. That's not a massive number, but it is enough to stimulate new growth because you've added resistance. And then you would repeat the same process and just build up. Now that you've added intensity, which is weight on the bar, you can go through the whole thing of just building up reps and tonnage over the course of several weeks or months. And again, you can repeat this process. If people want to do something like this, it's kind of called accumulation training or explosive accumulation training. you can do that. And you know what? Even I know Paul Carter's a fan of this sort of stuff. But like I said, he likes 5-rep sets because he wants a little more strength. That's more of what he's focused on. And he has people do something similar to this. And he's taking guys up to pretty impressive numbers when they go to meet. I know I read a while back in one of his, I think one of his blogs a couple years back, where he was doing this. He calls that kind of his base building style training. That while doing mostly stuff like that, he's taking guys into meets without them ever really doing a true peaking for meets. And they've hit some pretty impressive numbers at their first meet, you know, for guys who are like intermediate level lifters, you know, who've only been lifting weights like a year and a half or so, or up to 2 years. He's got them to some pretty impressive numbers. And so this sort of method is workable. It will increase multiple performance elements. And even though you're using weights that aren't particularly impressive, because you're working sometimes only between 60 to 70% of your maxes, you can build your maxes up doing this. But the beauty of it is that you're training your maximum speed so that when you do hit maxes in comp, you're going to move them faster. They're going to be prettier. They're going to look cleaner because you spent hours and hours and hours training those motor patterns over and over for your different lifts. You've built up speed. You've built a tremendous amount of speed strength, but because of the accumulation of fatigue, the accumulation of volume, you will also have covered most of your overall size. And I want to remind guys, like I said before on this, some guys will be like, well, I'd like to train this way, but I'm worried I might not get big enough biceps or whatever it is. Well, okay, do some curls. I mean, it's not a problem. The guys need to realize at the end of the day, a training style like this has a lot of elements, but if it's missing something that you need, you don't want to add a lot of extra stuff to a training style like this, especially if you're going to do it non-periodized, because it's going to be very taxing on you over time because of the accumulation of fatigue that bounce up over the weeks and months. But, you know, if you just look at it and say, well, I need a little more bicep, I need a little more side delt, then that's okay. Throw in a few curls and a few lateral raises to sort that out. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Just don't go all out on that sort of stuff and fatigue yourself to the point to where it affects the main lifts, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And that's the funny thing that it comes to all these big strength and power training programs is always the guys who still care a little bit about their looks and stuff forget is that if you have a muscle that you feel isn't developing enough there, it's kind of stopping you from getting the look that you want, you can do some higher rep isolation work for that. You know, you can come in and do 3 sets of 10 on some curls or some lateral raises or whatever you need to do to bring those things up. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. And as long as you don't go overboard on those and you don't try to do 15 or 20 sets of isolation movement a week for that muscle, it's not going to affect your main lifts significantly. It's not going to hurt them at all, and it will probably help bring those lagging areas up. I think it's sometimes people get a little too dogmatic with some stuff, and it's kind of an all or nothing for them. And with training, you can't always treat things that way. The only time you might treat things that way with an all or nothing is if you're trying to win a medal in the Olympics or something. But if you're not, it's probably not going to affect you to do that. So I get some guys who see a style of training like it's like, well, that sounds good because that will make me better at a lot of things I want to do. But, you know, I'm 22. I still kind of want to look good for the girls. I want a little more arm or whatever. Okay, well, do some curls, brother. But the thing to remember, training like this, it's not always about the individual session. It's about the weekly accumulation of overall tonnage and the tonnage that you're moving using explosive reps. And things like total tonnage moved, total reps done really start to mount up. And when you look at it instead of just an individual session, you start looking at the weekly accumulation. Or if you're throwing in an extra session here or there and just doing a few sets, those sets themselves are a form of progression. Meaning, let's say you've been doing it 3 days a week, but you have one day you come in, you have one lift you think needs a little more work, or 2 of them or whatever, and you do an extra session with just a few sets. Those few sets are a form of progressive overload because your weekly tonnage has been increased. That does count over time. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.